Oh, I'm sorry, people. The music is not playing. Let me fix that. I apologize. I just noticed that.
I'm sorry, people. The music is not playing. Let me fix that. I apologize. I'm sorry, people. The music is not playing. Let me fix that.
Okay. Okay. It should pop up now. All right. Let's start from the beginning again. Yep. Yes, yes. Welcome again to another wonderful stream here on Chaos Rain channel. I am known as Chaos Rain, formerly known. If you're not familiar with Chaos Rain podcast slash YouTube channel, always you can find me on YouTube. Type in Chaos Rain channel. I'm the one with the C with the spear. Hit that red button. Hit the top notification bell. So you know when I go live or do an upload. Also, you'll find season one and all episodes on podcast, Anchor, Spotify, etc. And I'm now going to start putting season two sometime in the coming days, a few weeks. And so I'm going to slowly present them. That was all that was done last year onto the podcast. People listen to audio, but I'm not going to hold much time. I would like to present you for the first time here, and as one of the few first guests I have on YouTube. I like want to bring in Dr. William Darity. Good evening, Dr. Darity.
Hi, and I'm here with my co-author on From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century, Kirsten Mullen.
How you doing, Miss Lloyd? This is very special. I wasn't expecting to see both you and the good doctor at the same time. This is a surprise. I gotta clap. This is good. Yes. Well, for no further ado, we're not gonna hold people's time. Dr. Derry and Miss Lowen, if you want to give a background for the people that will be listening, please.
Yeah, I thought we might share some portions of our book initially for the conversation.
Okay.
And I'd like to start with discussing two dimensions of what's in the book. The first concerns the way in which we define what reparations is. And the second concerns the phases of American history that are relevant to the case for Black reparations, reparations specifically for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. So please let me begin with how we define reparations, and I'd like to read directly from our text. We say the following. Reparations are a program of acknowledgement, redress, and closure for a grievous injustice. Where African Americans are concerned, the grievous injustices that make the case for reparations include slavery, legal segregation, or Jim Crow, and ongoing discrimination and stigmatization. ARC, the acronym that stands for Acknowledgement, Redress, and Closure, characterizes the three essential elements of the reparations program that we are advocating. Acknowledgement, redress, and closure are components of any effective reparations project. Acknowledgement involves recognition and admission of the wrong by the perpetrators or beneficiaries of the injustice. For African Americans, this means the receipt of a formal apology and a commitment for redress on the part of the American people as a whole, a national act of declaration that a great wrong has been committed. But beyond an apology, acknowledgement requires those who benefited from the exercise of the atrocities to recognize the advantages they gained and commit themselves to the cause of redress. Redress potentially can take two forms, not necessarily mutually exclusive: restitution or atonement. Now, in the context of our discussion, we settle upon restitution as the appropriate process of redress that's going to be applicable when we think about the Black American case. Specifically, restitution for African Americans would eliminate racial disparities in wealth, income, education, health, sentencing and incarceration, political participation, and subsequent opportunities to engage in American political and social life. It will require not only an endeavor to compensate for past repression and exploitation, but also an endeavor to offset stubborn existing obstacles to full Black participation in American political and social life. Finally, we mentioned closure, which is mutual reconciliation between African Americans and the beneficiaries of slavery, legal segregation, and ongoing discrimination toward Blacks. Whites and Blacks would come to terms over the past, confront the present, and unite to create a new and transformed United States of America. Once the reparations program is executed and racial inequality is eliminated, African Americans would make no further claims for race-specific policies on their behalf from the American government, on the assumption that no new race-specific injustices are inflicted upon them. So that's the scope of what we mean by reparations, and in a more precise sense, how we are thinking about the application of reparations to the case for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. Now, that case involves three phases of American history, running from the past to the present. And so we say the following in From Here to Equality. Our book draws the thick line from the nation's origins to the present. The case we build in this volume is based on all three tiers or phases of injustice: slavery, American apartheid or Jim Crow, and the combined effects of present-day discrimination and the ongoing deprecation of Black lives. Most advocates of Black reparations have focused exclusively on the injustice of slavery as the basis for redress. Law professor Boris Bitker argued that the case for Black reparations should center solely on the harms of legalized segregation, while Royal L. Brooks, also a legal scholar, has argued that the foundation for Black reparations is the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. We submit that the Bill of Particulars for Black reparations also must include contemporary ongoing injustices, injustices resulting in barriers and penalties for the Black descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. And we argue in the text that the key indicator of the cumulative intergenerational effects of these atrocities and damages is the current racial wealth disparity between Blacks and whites in the United States. That disparity is of a magnitude that Black American descendants of U.S. slavery are about 13% of the nation's population, but possess less than 3% of the nation's household wealth. And so we pose as an objective for a reparations project elimination of the racial wealth differential in the United States, which would require an expenditure of $10 to $12 trillion. Let me add, in concluding my portion of the opening presentation, that would mean bridging the gulf between an $850,000 differential in net worth between Black and white households. Okay. I'd like to turn next to Kirsten to talk further about the wealth differential and its origins.
I see. Okay.
We talk from Here to Equality about the history of America's Black reparations movement, and we make the point that not only were Black Americans the nation's first abolitionists, they were also the first to call for a national program of reparations. And they were targeting, specifically the nation's, refusal to fulfill its promise of 40-acre land grants to the newly emancipated freedmen. These were promises that were made, on several occasions while the Civil War was still underway, and also immediately following 1865. So I want to read from Here to Equality some passages that talk about the 40-acre land grant promise, what it meant, what it might have become, the significance of those 40-acre land grants for the newly emancipated freedmen. And also to make the point that we see this as the beginning of the Black-white wealth gap. All right. So we write in From Here to Equality. When General William T. Sherman and Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton asked Reverend Garrison Frazier, a native of Granville County, North Carolina, what he and the other freedmen would need to sustain themselves after the Civil War wound down, Reverend Frazier replied, land. Sherman and Stanton had come to Savannah, Georgia in January 1865 to query Black leaders about their vision of the way forward as President Lincoln sought to transform the war-ravaged country. 20 Black leaders, also members of the clergy, had selected the Reverend as their spokesman, and he explained, quote, the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and turn and till it by our own labor. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own. Okay, so we continue in the chapter on radicals and liberals. For more than 150 years, American folklore has preserved the tenets of the federal government's promise of reparations to the former slaves, 40 acres and a mule. That promise was not a figment of the collective Black imagination. Rather, it was the centerpiece of another, even bolder federal plan. General Sherman's Special Field Orders Number 15 were the directives that first authorized the redistribution of the balance of the land holdings confiscated from or abandoned by Confederates who supported the South against the North during the war, an expanse reaching 30 miles inland from the South Carolina Sea Islands to Florida to the freedmen. Sherman's plan had begun to take shape in January 1865, 3 months before the final battle of the Civil War was fought, when he and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton met in Savannah, Georgia, with 20 Black leaders, ministers, and church officers primarily, to discuss the plight of the state's freedmen. The leaders had selected slave and Granville County, North Carolina native Reverend Garrison Frazier, 67 years of age and a minister for 35 years, to be their spokesperson. He had managed to purchase his and his wife's freedom 8 years earlier with $1,000 in silver and gold. When asked to define the institution of slavery and state his understanding of the Emancipation Proclamation that President Lincoln had issued January 1st, 1863, Reverend Frazier replied, quote, slavery is receiving by irresistible power the work of another man and not by his consent. The freedom, as I understand it, he continued, promised by the proclamation is taking us from under the yoke of bondage and placing us where we could reap the fruit of our own labor, take care of ourselves, and assist the government in maintaining our freedom, end quote. When asked how the freedmen proposed to provide a livelihood for themselves, Reverend Frazier responded, quote, the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and to turn it and till it by our own labor, that is, by the labor of the women and children and the old men, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. And to assist the government, the young men should enlist in the service of the government and serve in such manner as they may be wanted. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own, end quote. When asked if he preferred to live among whites or solely among Blacks, Reverend Frazier indicated that while he could not speak for the other ministers, he preferred to live among Blacks, quote, for there is a prejudice against us in the South that will take years to get over, end quote. When questioned separately, all but one of the ministers, freeborn Baltimore, Maryland native James Lynch, 26 years of age, indicated that they would prefer to live among only other Blacks. We know that at the same time that the newly emancipated slaves were denied these 40-acre land grants, white Americans were provided 160-acre land grants in the Western Territories. And this also included recent immigrants from Europe. individuals who took, swore an oath that they had not borne arms against the Union during the Civil War. So this was a consequence of a single federal mandate, the Homestead Act of 1862. This was a program that was in place for about 70 years. And we know from the research of our colleagues, Trina Shanks-Williams and Jennifer Mueller, but also the work of the U.S. Department of Interior, that some 287 million acres of land were granted to these white Americans in the Western Territories. Now, to give your audience some sense of what 287 million acres looks like, if all of them were contiguous, this would be a land mass equivalent to all of Washington State, Oregon, California, Nevada, and Massachusetts combined, or put differently, all of Texas and California combined. It's a huge amount of land. We know that over that 70-year period, some 1.5 million white households were granted these land grants. And that when you look at, what they could do with that land, like what did it mean to own 160 acres of land during that period? This is land that you could lease, you could farm it yourself, you could subdivide it, you could borrow against it. This is, the profits could be used to pay for.
You actually built equity, real equity.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you could use it to, to fund a business, to send your children to college. It's a tremendous asset to have, but most importantly, you could bequeath the land and the profits from it to your children.
Yeah.
And this is precisely what white people did. And Black people were deprived not only of the 160-acre asset, this free equity from the federal government, they were also denied the 40-acre land grants. So they did not have the opportunity to, have that wealth come forward, to, the 20th and 21st centuries to their progeny. It's a huge leg up for white Americans that Black Americans were denied.
Okay. Excellent. And for those that's listening, please share the stream. Because as you know, when we talked, Dr. Darity, I got your book like maybe a few weeks later, and thank you for the signature card. I put it in the index on the side of my own book. Going through this, I haven't really read all of it, going through a good 1 or 2 chapters. I noticed there was a chapter dealing with myth of racial equality. There was this myth that I'm not sure when it comes to us as people or non-Black people, that people feel that we have arrived, that there's an even playing field. You could go to school, you could apply and get a job. So people understand what's the issue that I hear from non-Blacks say that you Blacks have it good now. But when we look at the real numbers, it's not really factual, especially when it comes to employment. So my question, in regards to most of our people that work, are they aware that you work for somebody that you're getting paid less out of a dollar than the average non-Black person, Caucasian man or woman? Because I heard that the Caucasian man, he comes out of school, he's able to get the full, I guess, salary without even a college degree. And I go in further. If you got the degree and you're training one of them, they will replace you on that same job.
Yeah,
With the time you,
Right.
Right.
And I hear this constantly from a lot of people that I know and you probably heard personally. And it makes me think that there's a big game going on where our people are not aware that nothing really has really changed at all. Because while I had to put the time, put myself in debt and come out, you know what I'm saying, all that, while this man could fly and breeze by and then put less the effort.
So what is true, I think, that the data demonstrates is that if you have better education, you can do better than other Black people who have less education, but you will not do as well as somebody white with a similar level of education or even a lower level of education. And this is really dramatically illustrated when we think about wealth instead of income, where a Black head of household with a college degree has 2/3 of the net worth of a white head of household who never finished high school. So education does provide you with a leg up in comparison with other Black folks, but it doesn't provide you with a similar leg up in terms of the position of white folks. And we actually have some evidence that suggests that the degree of discrimination that you face in employment actually intensifies as you become better educated. So that the higher the status of the type of employment that you might be eligible for, the greater the degree of obstacles to prevent you from either getting the job or from being paid the equivalent. I think one of the illustrations that we provide in the text concerns persons, Black and white, who finished Masters of Business Administration degrees at Harvard in the same year, where within the next 5 to 6 years, the individuals who were white would be earning $100,000 more per annum than the individuals who were Black. Same degrees from the same institutions, but very different subsequent outcomes in terms of the payoff from those degrees.
Okay, excellent, excellent, excellent. Oh, I'm here with my partner in crime from the great liberator himself. I'm Mary Brown. What's good, Mary? Oh, he dropped. He'll jump back in. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I see. You know, the thing about that, and I'm not knocking people that got degrees, because I'm talking to people that have PhD degrees. I mean, I have, getting a degree, or got a degree. Hey, Mary, but we have to know that it's going to take more than that to really even the playing field in this country, especially us as Black people. We need actual resources, because you're playing a catch-up game in the not only 20th century, but now even greater in the 21st century. And the way how there's structured now, they say that if you're a descendant of slaves here in America, you could be a not only permanent underclass, what Carl Andrew wrote on his books, but it's like you're not gonna have no wealth within the next 30-something years, as it's projecting right now. Now, I'm not sure if everybody's not gonna have wealth, but the way I would say here in America, because we're not getting nothing and we're just getting by. And if the job is done, whatever we accumulate can be gone with an instant. So that's the one thing I want people to be aware of, that it's going to take more than just the educate piece to get out of this, ditch that we are in as people. Mary, you there?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
How you doing? Yes, I'm with the doctors. Go ahead.
How you doing, Dr. Darity?
I'm doing okay.
All right, I'm a Mary Brown.
I'm doing well as well. I'm well also.
Sorry.
Ms. Mullen.
I'm sorry. I was going to get to that, but just allow me to introduce myself. I'm a Mary Brown. I host a YouTube channel as well, The Great Liberators, and this is something that that I've been paying attention to and talking about, ad nauseum, and that is the reality of economics, particularly Black economics, and in this day and age, and how it's a part of a historicity of American society. The question that I would like to pose is, what can everyday working class, middle class Black people do to help your cause? Because I think it's a noble cause, and I think it's a just cause, and it's something that needs to be taken seriously. So what are some things we can do on a grassroots level from everyday working class, middle class Black folk?
So, Mary, we believe this is America's cause. It's
Man,
not.
what's up?
Excuse me?
Hello, Mary? Hello? Oh no, he's on the phone with somebody. Don't mind. Go ahead.
So this is America's cause. And what we would advocate is that individuals, but also groups, this might be, an assignment that your family takes on, that your your colleagues at work take on, your colleagues at the nonprofits, communities of faith, cultural institutions to which you belong would take on, and that is to formally lobby and petition Congress for a national program of reparations for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery. We live in Durham, North Carolina, where the city council unanimously passed a resolution advocating for a national program of reparations. And this is something that you as an individual or a member of a group could do. You could, use as a model or use entirely the resolution that the Durham City Council of North Carolina drafted and passed, or write your own resolution. We would like to see such an effort include at least three basic tenets. And that is, first, that a resolution would identify the eligible recipients of restitution as Black American descendants of U.S. slavery, that it would target the elimination of the racial wealth gap as its goal. As Sandy talked earlier about this $850,000 differential between Black and white households today. It would also specify that payments be made directly to eligible recipients as opposed to some community organizations or some kind of community planning or college education programs, but specifically to target the individuals who are eligible for restitution, that they would receive those payments directly. And then the last piece is, looking to see, how you can encourage changes in the legislation that exists currently to study reparations. This is speaking now of HR 40. This is legislation that has been in place for over 30 years now to create a study commission to look at the treatment of Black Americans in this country and to make recommendations to Congress for restitution. But we could talk, if we have some time, to talk specifically about some of the changes that we think need to be made to that legislation in order to make it effective, or perhaps to have it scrapped and have new legislation drafted so that we can bring about true reparations. We know a lot more about how to alter the social and economic circumstances of Black American descendants of slavery now than we did in 1989, when that legislation was first introduced by John Conyers. And so because
That's
we have
32 years now. Okay.
I think it's important for us to talk about what kinds of changes would make that legislation more effective.
Yeah, I'd like to add one small point to this. In our conversations with John Tateshi, who is one of the central figures with the Japanese American Citizens League that played a key role in the establishment of a reparations plan for Japanese Americans who had been unjustly incarcerated during World War II. John Tateshi has emphasized the importance of having solidarity within the community that is seeking reparations. At the present moment, I think that upwards of 30% of Black Americans do not support reparations. And then among the 70% who do, there is a great deal of confusion over what type of form a reparations project should take. So I think that there's an internal mission that we have to fulfill in terms of creating a real uniformity of support for reparations within the Black community to be more effective in making our case to America as a whole.
Excellent, excellent. One other question before you say something, Mary. That's the biggest line. Well, what type of form of reparations should be feasible now for Black people in America now that is a stepping stone for actual repair? I look at it that there should be, like you said earlier in the dissertation, there should be land. I think there should be a few states that Black people should be given without, I guess, being taxed for a good while, or not at all, like all other groups, like the Native Americans. I don't think Native Americans pay taxes. Last time I checked, Dr. Derry and Miss
I'm not sure about
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Yeah, but there has to be something that really could be the stepstone to start to actually see some real repair that has been done for centuries, because Black people have built America and they should be owed what is rightfully due. I mean,
so,
yeah, go ahead.
so let me say this.
Mhm.
First of all, I'm not certain what land mass you are thinking of that's available,
Okay.
for this transfer. Two wrongs don't make a right, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and for us, the way that the reparations payments should occur is through direct payments to these individuals. I mean, it could be cash, it could be trust accounts, it could be other types of endowments, other kinds of assets that could be less liquid perhaps than cash.
Mhm.
But everyone doesn't necessarily want land.
Okay.
And if individuals were provided direct payments, those who wanted to purchase land for their own use or for sale could do so. But we think that decision should be, left to the individual eligible recipients. That should not be made.
Okay.
That's our thinking.
Okay, that makes sense. You give them an offer, say, all right, you are this. We're gonna give you some options for repair. You could take this in the form of land or form of cash, and they give the people the decision what to make if they go in front of
We
every.
don't advocate that land be part of this conversation at all.
Okay.
We do not.
Okay.
Give people
the resources, and if they want to purchase land, then they're free to do so.
Okay. All right. Amir, you have any other questions?
Yeah, I would like to ask the two guests how, because the way I've analyzed it and diagnosed the problem, when you're talking about what particularly ails Black society, I view it as a political problem that manifests itself economically. Meaning, we all know what the racial history is in this country, the history of discrimination and these different things, and I'm sure the lawmakers and the legislators are aware of it, both on the right and the left. My thing is, how do we go about creating the political will to get these individuals to do what's right, to redress the issues that at many times and at many turns the federal government was had their hands in. They were the architects behind the wealth gap, the racial wealth gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how do you think we would go about creating that political will to get something like that done?
You want to start?
Well, certainly. Some steps have been made so far, which is good, which is, changing the face of the Congress and the leadership of Congress. And we believe very much this is an issue that must be resolved by Congress, the federal government. But, you have to have, people who are allies who are in place, who are in those positions of power. But we're not powerless. I mean, individuals have the right, and they also have the authority to petition and lobby their elected officials. Let your feelings be known. And I think the more efforts that we make as individuals and also parts of groups, the better. We had imagined at one point that colleges and universities would lead the charge for reparations. But that hasn't been the case. There's been far more efforts on the parts of communities of faith and nonprofits and even cities and regional governments than on colleges and universities. But that isn't to say that if you are part of such an institution that you could not lead the charge. We also think it's really important for individuals to get their own houses in order. And by that, we mean, take a look at the formal and informal alignments, the affiliations that you have, and ask yourself, who are the thought leaders that you consult? Who are the people who get interviewed when there are jobs to be filled? Who receives the contracts when there are vendor contracts at stake? Does your organization look like the country? There's a lot, are you in, some of us have been in organizations where we were the only, Black person who was employed. Is that the case with your own institution, and what can you do to change that? It's a process that has a lot of moving parts, but there are a lot of things that we can do now and going forward to begin to push, to push at this mountain, as a Texas blues man, Jukeboard Bonner, would say, you have to push at a mountain. But I think it's important for us to recognize that we are not powerless. We have agency, and it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
I would add that there's a concern about how this whole process will unfold that involves some of the local governments, municipalities, that are now claiming that they are doing reparations at the local level. We think that this is really, really problematic. If you were to take all of the budgets for state and local governments and combine them, all 50 states and all the cities and municipalities throughout the United States, their total budgets would amount to about $3.1 trillion. But to eliminate the racial wealth differential would require somewhere in the vicinity of $10 to $12 trillion. So whatever these localities are calling reparations is really a misnomer. What we would like to see them do is to form a segment of the coalition that's needed to petition and lobby Congress for reparations. That's one of the things we like about the resolution in our hometown, Durham, North Carolina, is that it calls for precisely that. It calls for a national reparations program. It does not claim that any initiatives taken at the local level would constitute reparations. In fact, I guess in Durham, we refer to them as racial equity initiatives. But reparations should be reserved for a project that is directed at eliminating the racial wealth gap throughout the United States, and that will require federal action. And Amir, I mean, you're quite right. The federal government is the culpable party. It's the party that created the legal and authority framework for the atrocities that have been directed against Black Americans.
Okay. Excellent.
Indeed. Now, the other thing I did want to ask you guys about was, now that we've gotten that out of the way, we know we have to build a political movement to push the legislators in that direction. The other concern that I would have, and I'm sure others have, is to what extent can we insulate ourselves from sabotage or being undermined. And what I mean by that is, when we're talking about reparations and we're talking about the wealth gap, a lot of times what I hear and what I see is where you have individuals who want to make it an all-inclusive thing, right? So they might mention Asian Americans, they might mention Native Americans, and all of these other out groups. But we're talking about specifically redress to the atrocities that were committed against Black people, or ADOS.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys suppose we would go about meeting that challenge? Because I think that would probably be one of the greatest obstacles to getting reparations specifically for Black people. I mean, something that we've heard, and this is something that the Obama administration would say routinely, and that is a rising tide lifts all boats. And when the empirical data doesn't back up that claim, but in the political discourse, whenever the particular issues that plague Black society and Black people are raised, this is what we are told: a rising tide lifts all boats, and we know from the empirical data that simply isn't true.
I mean, you're exactly right. We've observed over time that all too often these big tent government policies are laid out, and then Black Americans are the first people to be pushed out from under the tent, right? And so everyone else is benefiting while they're standing in the rain. But I think, it's important to say that these other groups do have claims, but that is not the claim that we are making. I mean, I know that candidate Joe Biden said that he might consider reparations for Black American if it was coupled with reparations for Native Americans. And so I think it's important to say that, yes, absolutely, there's a case to be made for Native American reparations, but that is not the case we are making. I think it is important to be singular and to be very specific. We talk about two criteria for eligibility, an identity standard and a lineage standard. And so what we mean by that is that, eligible recipients would be direct descendants of at least one person who was enslaved in the United States. And these are individuals who have self-identified as Black, African-American, Afro-American, or Negro at least 12 years prior to the enactment of legislation to create a reparations program or a study commission on reparations. So, I think it's important to just, almost to become a broken record, say, yes, there are a number of groups that have been discriminated against, that have been harmed, that have incurred injuries from the federal government, and they have a case, but that is not the case we're making now. We salute them, we encourage them, and we are going to stay focused on this particular call for reparations for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
No other group has the history of having ancestors who were forced to migrate to the United States, as opposed to being voluntary immigrants. And no other group has a claim on restitution that's associated with the promise that's unfulfilled for the 40-acre land grants.
Absolutely. We also make the point that, the claim for Native Americans is one of sovereignty, whereas the claim for Black Americans is a claim for full citizenship. These are two different things, and they need to be pursued in very different ways. We can be allies, but we don't want to subvert, the cause of Native Americans for the cause of Black Americans, and we shouldn't, nor should they. These are claims that have merit on their own account, and they should not be diluted or diverted by, conversations about other groups.
Okay.
It's right on time that you mentioned that making that distinction between sovereignty and citizenship, because one thing I've noticed when I'm having these discussions with Black people is oftentimes we confuse and we conflate the two. It seems that what we do is we want to act as if we have a choice between our Blackness and our Americanness, not understanding that our Blackness is uniquely American.
Yes.
I mean, that's where it's derived from. It's derived from the American experience. So even when we're having these discussions, you have to deal with the contingency of Black people who otherize themselves from the larger collective of American society. And this is exactly what we're dealing with. We're dealing with gaining access to our full citizenship and what that is supposed to mean, especially when you're talking about economics, because we live in the richest nation on the planet. So why is it we shouldn't have a piece of that wealth? This is something that we've been locked out from.
Thank you for that analysis, Mary. I will be quoting you going forward. I love that. Our Blackness is uniquely American. That is true. It's absolutely true. I think Sandy has a point that he wanted to make too, using our book From Here to Equality.
I think this relates to the whole set of questions about returning to Africa. And actually, the idea of returning to Africa was not initially an idea that was promoted heavily by Black people. It was promoted most heavily in the middle of the 19th century by folks who wanted to get rid of the Black population in the United States.
Yeah.
But the repatriation effort was also something that was for a while promoted by President Abraham Lincoln. And there is a fantastic response that was written by the Black abolitionist Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. And I'd like to share that.
Yes,
Okay.
He said the following to Abraham Lincoln: "Let the president be answered firmly and respectfully, not in the tones of supplication and entreaty, but of earnestness and decision, that while we admit the right of every man to choose his home, that we neither see the wisdom nor expediency of our self-exportation from a land which has been in large measure enriched by our toil for generations, till we have a birthright on the soil, and the strongest claims on the nation for that justice and equity which has been withheld from us for ages, ages whose accumulated wrongs have dragged the present wars that overshadow our head." And we say in the text, Blacks would stay and demand full justice in America. Now, after reparations are received, if there are folks who want to use the funds to go to other parts of the world, so be it. That's their decision and judgment. But, personally, Kirsten Mullen and I are planning to stick around until reparations are made.
Absolutely.
You should stick around, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, we could laugh, but let's be honest. Every person that ancestors have gone through the trauma, the abuse, all the above, you are due repair. And I bias most Black, even the people that said, the small percent said they don't want reparations, they're saying that now, but we know the majority of people right there, educate or knowing why it's important to push for it, would reconsider. Otherwise, say, yeah, we need reparations. To be honest with you, Dr. Darity and Ms. Mullen, the people that really saying that out of that 30%, I'm be honest with you, some of them not even descendant of slaves. Some of them are foreign Blacks. When they do these interviews and talk to them, when they tell them what their background, some are not even born in America. So we have to be careful who's speaking on us, because they push people in front that is said as Black Americans, but some of you look at the background, they're not even really have no inclination to this land, because most of the parents or one is not from this soil, like Kamala Harris or anybody that we even Mr. Powell, I think he says West Indian descent. I don't know, but when you look at the background, yeah,
that's right.
So I'm not people that from the foreign, but be honest with y'all, when we speak about issues about Black people that fought and bled to make the way for people that to come here, they should have more respect on Black people's name and stay out of our business. But go on.
Well, I don't think there's been any analysis of the composition of the
opposition.
That would
That's
be
an interesting point.
A very interesting point to make, to learn more specifically, what might be informing these opinions. Now, we have said a number of times that for Black American descendants of slavery who, after hearing all of the evidence, still oppose reparations, they could simply sign a document saying that they would not accept them if they were offered, and that their portion would go back, into the general pool and be redistributed to others. There's nothing to stop them from refusing a receipt of restitution.
You really think
that it would be harmful to them? Victim
psychology would be built into their bones by taking reparations.
Force them to accept.
They don't have to take it.
Reparations.
I agree. That makes sense. Go on. I'm sorry. That makes sense. They shouldn't take it. If they say, here, we check your background, you were a former slave from the criteria that met. Are you willing to take this? And someone you have an option, either take it or don't take it. And to be honest with you, the most like I said that talk this are not really born in America. So if it was presented to them and the money was given, I guarantee they'll have a different they'll have a different perspective. They'll probably will take it on the average, because no one's going to turn out nothing. I mean, the good people that's talking that's the small portion that's talking that stuff. Really, I feel they have no connection to the American experience. But that's my opinion. You have anything to say, Mary? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to add one thing to what Dr. Darity mentioned when he mentioned the Return to Africa movement, and it was removing the black population. But to be more specifically, they wanted to remove the free black population.
Initially,
Right.
Because they viewed them as a threat to the slave system in the South. But aside from that,
after the Civil War ends, though, and slavery was ended, at least in a technical sense, there was a substantial amount of sentiment among white Americans that all blacks should be repatriated, because so that it was a pretty extensive perspective about sending us out of the country that we had built.
Exactly.
and that we had come to involuntarily. We didn't ask to come here, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, the blood equity and the sweat equity that we have in the very foundations of this country. I mean, the first person who was killed, starting the American Revolution was Crispus Attucks. Now, the other thing I would like to ask you to is, if we had a timeline, what do you think would be a realistic, practical timeline from where we're talking about it in a philosophical perspective to where we could actually make it a reality and make it a real, like, public policy?
Let me say this. I don't know the answer. I'm not sure. Kirsten may have a better answer than I do. But I will say this. The circumstances are better now than at any point that I've previously seen, which is also one of the reasons why I think white supremacist violence has intensified so much, is that there is a perception that we are in a climate where something like a major reparations project can be given serious consideration. And the reason I say that is, if you went back to the year 2000, there was a study that was done by Ravana Popov and Michael Dawson, two faculty members at the University of Chicago, where they surveyed American opinion about reparations. And they found that about 4% of white Americans endorsed reparations. The most recent study that we're aware of was completed in June 2020 by Civics, and that study indicates or suggests that about 30% of white Americans now endorse reparations. So it's a very different climate, and the question becomes whether or not we can build momentum out of these attitudinal changes to move forward. But I don't have any way of suggesting what the timeline, what an exact timeline might look like.
Yeah, I mean, that Civics survey of July, actually, I think, is significant because of its timing. I mean, this is, immediately on the heels of the horrible, murder of George Floyd. I mean, we hope that we won't require, similar, horrible events that are filmed. I mean, we know that these things are happening even while we're engaged in this conversation. And it was the fact that his murder was on film that that was recorded that made it possible for others to see it and not refute what happened. That was really, I think, a very important piece to reckon with. I mean, it's possible. I was just wondering earlier today. We have horrible deaths of other people at the nation's capital, which should also be cause for a reckoning in this country. It would be unusual for you know, the kind of protests that we saw becoming a catalyst for change that would, benefit all Americans, but especially Black Americans. But that would be an amazing outcome. That would be an amazing of the insurrection attempt that we all would.
Excellent, 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 let me see. One question that came to mind, because I mentioned about the foreigners, could America keeps importing people, and I think they import, I think, more European than non-blacks overall. And this has been the process since, I guess, 1800s, since the I don't know if it's after slavery. But I've noticed now when they stop importing the Africans from the west part of Africa in the end of the 1700s, that I guess now they were promoting America to point I guess for other whites, because they were building some type of wealth to say, if you look for opportunity from where you're at, come here and you could be something. And it was like a mass migration. And I think the migration still goes on today in America. The question I have to ask is, with the people that are like us, that's Black, right? Do you feel that when they look down at Black Americans, that they're getting like some form of leg up, because they do get some benefits? Some people that are Black that come here from the book second chapter, that they're able to get certain grants and stuff. I think that's dealing with maybe foreign aid for people that are eligible, that come to America from the Caribbean to Africa.
So,
yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the nature is of the type of governmental support that they receive. I know that there are groups like the Cuban immigrant community receives substantial U.S. government support when they migrated to the United States. But I'm not so sure about other groups. What I will say is a high proportion of Black immigrants, particularly Black immigrants from countries in West Africa like Nigeria, actually are drawn from a comparatively elite strata of their societies. The way we describe this in the technical jargon is that these are hyper-selected communities, which means that the immigrant community is more affluent and better educated than the average person in their country of origin, and the West African immigrant community is so hyper selected that actually they're better educated than most Americans when they come to the United States. So there's a starting point that they have, which may lead some of them superior, not only to the folks in their country of origin, but also superior to Black Americans. And that's a potential issue in terms of divisiveness between the communities. But I will say that that's not an opinion that every Black immigrant to the United States shares. But I think this is something that we do need to explore, just as you suggested that it would be important to try to examine the composition of the Black folks who are actually opposed to reparations.
And the reason why I pose this question and I harp on it, because I do see a sense of divide between Blacks here already and some Blacks that's not from here. And when I look at overall how we're viewed globally, that we're not in a good spot as a race right now. And because we play these divide and conquer games, and I think maybe it's tribal, because maybe the history about us, not just America, but generally, because we do come from this part of Africa as, the base, that we still have these behaviors, maybe genetically or just a natural way. I don't know.
No,
I don't think so.
no.
I don't think science bears that out.
No.
Okay.
I certainly think that, colonial powers have, there's a lot of evidence to demonstrate that colonial powers have understood divide and conquer. that
Mm.
you find, sometimes an almost invisible trait. Whether you're pitting, people who speak a certain language, or people who eat certain foods, people who worship differently. You set them apart as people who are less than, and then you give perks to the other group, and so people want to be favored, or maybe the perks are really significant.
Yeah, I mean, the
Maybe one group is near starving.
classic example is the Belgians favoring the Tutsis over the Hutus, and what the long-term consequences of that have been. Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate that humans are susceptible to these kinds of differentiations, but usually it doesn't work unless one group is being favored materially over another.
Right.
That's what makes the difference. It's not just that it's not just a thing of people's imaginations. There's usually something concrete, something material, something very specific that leads one group to more closely align itself with their natural oppressor.
Okay. Yeah, because
let me add one more thing here, and then I'm not sure how much longer we're going.
yeah, we'll go for like a few more minutes, because I don't think nobody's all watching. But go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to add that I think that there is a strong basis for solidarity across the Black diaspora once we recognize that everybody does potentially have a claim for restitution, but it's not necessarily from the same country. So, I would say that Black immigrants to the United States who are from Haiti or from Jamaica definitely have claims for redress that are associated with their country of origin. So the Haitian community has a claim from France. And that's a paradoxical situation, because France actually compelled Haiti to pay reparations to them, and we think the money needs to go back, and it needs to go back with substantial interest. But also, the Jamaican population has a claim on the United Kingdom. So everybody doesn't have a claim on the U.S. government, but Black American descendants of U.S. slavery certainly do. And we can support one another in the claims that we make against the respective colonial power.
I mean, what would it be like if, if Black American descendants of U.S. slavery had the support of the entire African continent,
Oh, wow.
in this cause for restitution? And if they would come together and say, we support the U.S. federal government paying restitution to Black American descendants of slavery, and until they do so, we will not allow any additional U.S. corporations to operate on the continent. That would be phenomenal.
It would be beautiful.
And then Black American descendants of U.S. slavery could then support that, just as many did when the cause was apartheid in South Africa. Many Black Americans and other allies, came forth to insist that U.S. corporations, colleges and universities, pension funds, et cetera, divest themselves of financial interest in South Africa as a way of pressuring the country to eliminate apartheid, to free political prisoners, and hopefully to alter the social economic status of, the Black South African. That's another conversation to have there about what did and didn't happen. But the question about solidarity is one that I think is really, really significant. There's a lot that could be done across the diaspora to support these individual claims against specific states that colonized and enslaved these individual groups of people.
I see. Well, my final question, and this is somewhat important, because I'm a Black man, and I had to ask this. In regards after integration of the 1965 and move forward. Do you feel either you, Dr. Derry, or Ms. Moore can answer this, that as Black men, do we feel that we kind of dropped the ball in regards we took it back and relax after we are now, assimilate into the system after the 60s, that there's no need to push any forward to really get what really is necessary for the actual repair?
I'm not sure. I think that I think where Black people collectively dropped the ball was with our feeling that the election of Barack Obama was going to make everything happen correctly for us. But I don't think that that was specifically Black men. I think that was both Black men and Black women. And in fact, I'm really a little bit startled by the extent to which there is this tendency to argue that the perspectives of Black men and Black women are significantly different, when I don't really think that they are on average. And so, but I think where we dropped the ball was during the Obama years.
Well, I would actually say something slightly different, and that is that it's vital, that Black Americans and their allies, push for measures like the 1965 voting rights legislation. But it's also important to recognize that seeing the legislation pass, which is a huge milestone, is not the point to just step back and say, everything has been accomplished. That is in some ways when the next phase of work begins, and making sure that the legislation is in fact carried out. And, making, I think people have begun to understand far more clearly in the last 4 years the significance of the down ballot strategies. That it's not just a question of who is president of the United States, although that is really, really important, but that there are all of these other levels of government where it's really important to be sure that the person or persons who are elected have the interests of Black American descendants at heart. So there's really no point when one can step back and rest on one's laurels. I mean, you elect these individuals and then you hold them to account, always. What I think need to do is to think about how to create mechanisms so that there is a cycle, a continuous conversation with these elected officials, and a review of the measures that, you mentioned the timeline, create a timeline and periodically check to see where, how much progress has been made and what needs to be done to make a corrective. But this idea that, you wash your hands after getting, any individual elected, and things will be on automatic pilot is, I think, just a pipe dream.
Excellent. I think that's that's a perfect answer to that question. Thank you. In wrapping up, how I view it, because I see more of a divide lately between men and women in our race right now, and it shouldn't be, but it is what it is. But to know, saying that if we're going to come out of this, it's going to take a collective effort on both ends.
Yes.
There's no way around it. At much times as man, we drop ball bad and we could do things to fix that, but it's going to take collective effort with our women, and start small with our own household, and then hope that it's branched out and hold, like you said, these people that we selected that said it's going to do the job, we got to hold their feet to the fire. And it's going to take more, and our people got to get out of fear that just being quiet and just doing little, your part is enough. No, we have to do a little bit more, because these electives, they don't respond until there's pressure. As lately, what's happened a week ago to say that these people say, because their nature, they will take even aggressive stance to get what they want. Not saying we won't do that, but saying that they know they had to do something necessary, and like I tell people many times, because they put these people in front and they say, okay, you're Black as me, I expect you to get the job done. No, that's not the case, because we already know for many of us that's in these positions, it hasn't shown for it because we're not pushing the pressure. And if we did that more, we get different outcomes. So that's all I'm gonna say on that. I'm gonna let people marinate on that. But yeah, I wonder where could people find the two of y'all for like the books or anything, links or contacts.
So you're asking where individuals can purchase?
Yeah, like to follow you or anything, and yeah, for future.
So we advocate that individuals, look at your independent, booksellers. First of all, of course, there's always the big box store, in the cloud that exists as well. But this is a great opportunity to give some love to your local bookstores, which I'm sure can really, really, benefit from that patronage. And you were asking, was the other question?
No, the question, like, anybody you have any LinkedIn's, any social medias, people question, or any, even bookings or possible? Yeah, Dr. Darity or you
on Twitter at
Sandy Darity. At Sandy Darity. That's
yeah. I'll find the links and put in the description of this broadcast. But I'd like to thank you, Dr. Darity and Miss Mullen, for coming on. This is a very educational experience. And this is one of many broadcasts that I might start venturing a little bit. Because I have a show on another platform. So this is something new I did on YouTube straight fresh, So, it worked out for the better. I hope everybody in the chat room that will watch this or will be watching this go back to replay this. Also, please, and let me show the picture of the book. I advise people to
I want to say while you're doing that, to also thank Callie Jane for these 79 for these really positive comments throughout. It's much appreciated.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
I advise everybody get the physical book itself. I don't mind digital copies if you can, but I like to read the books, as you can tell. Yeah.
Nice to write in the margins, Put your own notes in the margins.
I mean, yeah, we gotta be old fashioned. I mean, I'm a Gen X / millennial, so I had to write notes, keep labels. Old fashioned.
We older than you are.
Hey, I mean, we're not going that, but yeah, we're not going. But what I'm saying. But thank y'all for
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll probably do this again. Yeah, we're gonna probably do this again down the line, Dr. Darity and Miss Mullen. And hey, I might bring you on Miss Mullen separately. Who knows? We'll see.
All right.
Very good.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to today's stream. If you missed this replay, please check my channel at Chaos Reign, or I should say Chaos Reign on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chaos Reign 7. I'll try to be more active on Twitter a little bit, but like I said, if you have any ideas or any suggestions or views, you could tweet me on there. Kylie James, I'm not sure if you could put it in the chat room if you could. If not, I'll put it in the description. And like I said, I will be preparing season 2 for podcasting, so be on the lookout for that. I think moving forward, I will try to find other authors to come on to talk about certain books, certain situations, and you get a more academic perspective. I think that's the best I could do right now for a lot of people. And I'll be honest with you, these conversations are not going to be very appealing. It's not going to be sexy. I get it. But with all the foolishness and rubbish we see throughout what we hear on radio and what we see on YouTube or any television, we got to take a little break and then just go back to the intellectual side. Go back to the grassroots of things so we could really have a clear analysis of what is a problem, where we at, and what necessary steps to find the solutions. So that will be it. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to today's stream. Be on the lookout for the next I guess live stream, and like always, I'd like to hear from you. Leave your comments at the end of this podcast / video. Till next time. Anything else?